Let's bring in Georgia Congressman Doug Collins. He is a member of the House Judiciary Committee, and Congressman, as such, law enforcement is right there in your wheelhouse. When you see what's going on in New York City and other cities across the country in terms of police coming under attack, what do you think?
I'm disgusted, and as a son of a state trooper down here, who's someone who's been in law enforcement all my life and around it, it really makes me just furious to see these mayors and see these governors, you know, whether it's from defund the police or to put new laws to restrict them and not letting them do their jobs. And we've seen it here in Atlanta with Mayor Bottoms and the Fulton County DA down here. But let me just say this, to Mayor de Blasio, to any of these other legislators, AOC, all these governors, if they don't like what the police are doing, then get themselves into a police car. Go out and do their job. Ride with these folks instead of talking to them. And if they want to get out there and do the job, and when you saw a New York City police officer choked the other night while everybody was laughing and taking pictures and the mayor did nothing, then they need to get in these cars, do the job, and make a difference or shut up. I'm just tired of these politicians deciding what police can do when they won't let their executive detail go, so their protection's there, but they won't do the job.
And that was a suggestion made by a former New York City police officer on this program yesterday. There was also an incident in Atlantic Beach, Florida the other day in which a police officer was beaten until he was unconscious. Let's listen to what the acting police chief of Atlantic Beach had to say about that.
Witnesses in the area confirm that the officer was laying on the ground and the suspect was actively punching him in the head while he laid in the ground.
I mean, people seem to think out there that they have got license to just go ahead and attack police. How do we reverse this trend, Congressman?
Well, we start standing up for law and order, and in doing so in a way that respects everyone's individual rights. This is not about coming in and shutting down a city with, you know, and being a oppressive law enforcement environment. But we have to have a community that actually has law enforcement, that people that do their job and they do it right. 99.9% of all the police officers do it right, and they need to continue to. We need to get the bad ones out, but then communities have to understand what their role is in being a part of a civil society. But we cannot, I think what is happening here, and the reason they're feeling that it's licensed to do it is what you see in these cities, in New York and Portland and Seattle, Atlanta and others, when you have mayors and you have elected members of Congress even who blame police first and say that everything else just ought to fall in line. That's not the way civil society works, and that's why you see what you're seeing, and it's got to stop. People do not need to feel unsafe in their communities.
Another big issue down there in Georgia, as it is across the country, is going back to school. Fulton and Cobb counties announced that they are not going to go back into school. They are going to begin with online learning when the school year begins. That is in addition to the city of Atlanta and DeKalb County. Are you concerned, Congressman, that students will not be going back to school?
I am concerned. My wife just retired from teaching after 30.5 years in K through 5. Those younger minds need a teacher. They need to be in a classroom where they have that environment. You know, parents need to be a part of the education of every child as well, and they need to do that from home. But there's an important place for our teachers, and having in school learning is something that needs to happen. I hope this is not going to last long. I hope they get these kids back into school as quickly and as safely as possible, which can be done, but we've got to get these kids back, and it doesn't need to be used as a fear of what could be. We need to get the kids back in learning, because if not, we're going to pay for this several years down the road with the lack of in-person training we're seeing.
So we've got some competing schools of thought here. The National Academy of Sciences, Medicine, and Engineering issued a report which said that online learning is ineffective for elementary school students as well as students for special needs. It would suggest that they should go back to in-class learning. But let's put it up on the screen. A new Quinnipiac poll found that 62% of voters think that it is unsafe at this point to put students back in school. So how do you reconcile those two things?
Well, the first thing we got to do is just have an honest discussion on how the virus is transmitted, how we can make precautions to make sure we don't, with good hygiene, with hand washing, you know, masks where needed, those kind of things. But we've also got to have an environment which much of the mainstream media, especially on the left, seems to be advocating a shutdown. They seem to be advocating a society that lives in fear. And unfortunately, I believe sometimes a lot of that has to do with political leanings, that they believe this is bad for the president. And that's just so what we're seeing. We've got to get back to honesty in our discussions on science and honesty in discussion on how education should take place. We can do this safely. People just need to see that. But they also are getting scared all the time. They turn on a media outlet which says, you know, the worst is near.
You mentioned masks there, and there's a dust-up over masks. The Governor Brian Kemp is suing the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, over her mandate for people to wear masks in public. She said about this, Georgians have died, and I and my family are amongst the 106,000 who tested positive for COVID-19. Meanwhile, I've been sued by Governor Kemp for a mask mandate. A better use of taxpayer money would be to expand testing and contact tracing. Congressman, what's wrong with the mask mandate? I mean, there are plenty of places across the country, including this bureau here, where we are being mandated to have a mask on before we walk in the door.
That's great. Private enterprise can do that, and that's where it needs to start. Businesses, and this governor has actually told people they need to wear masks. He's encouraged it. He's followed through on his own example of wearing a mask. What Mayor Bottoms is doing is auditioning for vice president. She could talk about a waste of taxpayer dollars. Why doesn't she actually get involved with her Atlanta Police Department against a Fulton County DA who has actually charged police officers without a grand jury investigation, without actually having the Georgia Bureau of Investigation finish theirs? This is not about people not wearing masks. This is about people being responsible and safe. I would ask the mayor, how are you going to enforce this, Mayor? You have a police department right now that's struggling to maintain law and order, and you're wanting them to go around and check people's masks. Let private enterprise, let people use common sense, and that's how we come out of this.
Congressman, one thing I do like about the speed at which you talk is we can get a lot in a finite amount of time. Good to talk to you this morning, Doug Collins.
It's always good to talk with you. Take care.
All right. Julie?